Apologies. We are getting started. First bill on the agenda to work for final action is Senate Bill 32, and I know that there has been an amendment that's been worked on. So Representative Poskin, I'll recognize you. And I'll let you make a motion. We'll get a second, then you can get your motion or your blue language out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment to Senate Bill 32, and I would like to say that what it does is improve on an already fantastic bill. Gotcha.
Yeah, and then we'll let Nick get in some more of the explanations. Well, let's go. Yeah, let's go ahead and make the motion first.
Gotcha. I move that we pass the bill out favorably.
Okay, we have a motion and a second from Representative Thomas. All right. Now that we're on the bill, you can hand out your balloon language. And then I'll let Nick. While they're handing that out, Nick, why don't you go ahead and give a brief explanation?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Deborah might have emailed this out to the committee members as well. So those of you online should have access to it. What this amendment does, again, on this bill dealing with dual and concurrent enrollment, there's a requirement currently in the bill that the post-secondary educational institutions notify students if the course that they're enrolling in is not on the system-wide transfer course approved by the State Board of Regents. What this amendment would do would strike that language and instead state in similar terms that students shall be notified upon acceptance for dual or concurrent enrollment that courses may or may not be part of the system-wide transfer program approved by the State Board of Regents, and that transfer of credits depending on that transfer language, should be, the student should look into that essentially. So what this requirement would do is it would state that this notice should refer students to that State Board of Regents website that provides information on those courses so the students could access that. Should also encourage students to consult with their high school counselor or post-secondary academic advisor regarding course planning and future plans for these courses, and also encourage students who are considering enrollment at institutions that are not on the State Board of Regents transfer portal and on that system to refer to those institutions' websites and to consult with those institutions for information on transferability. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, questions for Nick at this time? Why don't we go ahead and, so we can get into discussing the amendment, let you make your motion to amend.
I moved.
Did you already make that motion?
I think I did.
No, I thought we made the initial motion. We haven't made the motion to amend.
Okay, I moved to amend Senate Bill 32.
With the language,
With the language
just handed out.
You just handed out. Thank you.
Okay, and we have a second from Representative Collins. All right, now we're into further discussion. So after his discussion, do you have anything you would like to add to what he said, or?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. You did a great job of discussing the amendment. What I will tell you is that all it does is make a great bill a little bit better by changing the notification point as opposed to notifying a student after they've enrolled in a dual or concurrent credit course. It moves it to when they've been accepted. And I will tell you that as a mom of 7 and college advisor 2000s, I'm delighted to put it into law that you have to plan ahead a little more. I stand for any questions.
And I can tell you that Blake Flanders is in the building. I just spoke to him a few minutes ago. He's across the aisle over here, and they're very supportive of this amendment. And I told him I didn't think he needed to come over and smile at us to let us know that, because he's testifying on another bill in Senate Higher Ed. I do think it is a good amendment. It makes improvements. Further discussion or comments, Representative Sanders, and then next is Representative Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it seems like a really good amendment to me, but what I'd like to know is what form would that encouragement take?
I believe that would be up to the institution. As stated, it would be notified during the acceptance process, and most students these days get an acceptance email, and so it would be up to the institution, but it would be upon their notification of acceptance to the dual and concurrent credit program.
Thank you.
Representative Burkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any grade requirement once they're enrolled in it? I mean, or can they just fail the class or drop it? I assume there's,
Every institution will have a policy on that, but generally speaking, they earn the grade that they earn, and it goes on their permanent college transcript. And there are usually drop and add periods for most colleges, and I am just speaking from my experience, not for any institution, but that's my understanding of how it works.
well, I was just thinking in my mind, like, they'll pay for it up front, just like you typically would, but if I don't know how many kids drop out or whatnot during the course of a semester, but I just hadn't.
We might ask Nick if he has anything to add to that. Did you hear that discussion, Nick?
So basically to state, I think the question being, is there a requirement kind of for academic achievement to maintain satisfactory achievement to stay kind of within the program?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm looking in the bill in the current law now, and I'll keep looking, but to be a student under the program, there's some criteria that's listed under current law. One of that criteria under current law is that the student has demonstrated the ability to benefit from participation in this dual and concurrent enrollment program, and also has been authorized by the principal to apply for enrollment at a post-secondary educational institution under the program. So there might be some leeway there to make sure that students are doing okay in their coursework in that regard.
Further questions or comments from committee? Seeing none, you may close on your amendment.
I close. Please support the amendment.
All right, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, we're back on the bill as amended. Further discussion? Seeing none, we already have the motion to pass out the bill. It's been amended, so yeah, let's just go ahead just to make sure we're doing it correctly. Make another motion to pass the bill out as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we pass the bill out, Senate Bill 32, favorably as amended.
Do we have a second? Nick, and everybody should have the copy of that, that it was emailed out to you. I'm going to make the motion that we pass out Senate Bill 62 favorable for passage. And we have a second from Representative Thomas. Now that we have that motion, I guess I don't need to vote on it. Discussion on it. And again, even after last week's discussion on the balloon, there was some suggestions made, and Nick tried to address that in a way that took into consideration our discussion. And I'll as she's handing those out, Nick, I'll let you go ahead and go over the revised balloon that is being handed out right now.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Something, if you can still hear me, something seems to be going on with the audio, and if I could just
We're good.
If I could just confirm the action on Senate Bill 32, I assume that was a be passed as amended.
Well, no, we're right now we made the motion to pass it out. Now we decided to amend the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
32. Oh, no, 32 was passed as amended.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize for that. My WebEx audio and video to the committee went down and I lost you guys. Okay,
Right.
On Senate Bill 62, again, we briefly touched on this last week. The updated balloon fits albuterol into the current statutory scheme. The only changes that you'll note is that what the new balloon amendment says is that a school nurse or nurse's designee administering the albuterol would would fall under, or would be the only persons that can fall under the administration of albuterol under current law. So you'll see that throughout, but otherwise, it fits albuterol into the current statutory scheme, like epinephrine currently exists, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Nick, Representative Shriver? Representative Shriver, you might unmute. Representative Shriver, are you here?
Okay.
All right, we got you now.
All right. My question was back on the previous bill. I still haven't seen that amendment. It's already passed, so that's fine. But if the amendment's out there and distributed,
we'll make sure you get an email copy.
I'd appreciate it.
All right. Hey, let us know in the future when we don't want to, we want to make sure everybody online is on the same page as everybody here. All right. Are you in the building, Representative Shriver?
I'm in my office, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then you can vote. Representative Sanders.
Nick, as I remember when we talked about this originally, there were some liability provisions or taking away or making sure that doctors and pharmacists weren't liable when we were working this or discussing it as a standalone bill. I don't notice any of the liability language put into this amendment. Where is it? I'm sorry.
So the only issue with liability that would arise under this amendment is by fitting albuterol into the current statutory scheme, this section 2, what you see there with the old language, allows persons who render this emergency medication, in current law's case, epinephrine, if they administer that medication in good faith on an emergency basis, they're not liable and not practicing the healing arts, not to be deemed to be practicing the healing arts, and not liable for damages. So what this amendment would do is it would put albuterol into that same footing. And so anybody who, well, in this case, a school nurse or nurse's designee who's administering the albuterol would not be liable and would not be construed to be practicing the healing arts if they're rendering that in good faith and in an emergency
Right.
situation.
I understand that part of it, but maybe I'm misremembering language relative to liability, talking about doctors who would be prescribing it and pharmacists who would be issuing the medication. But maybe I don't.
Well, that was
No.
part of the original bill.
Right.
And that's
So
not-
that language isn't going to be included in this then.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
That's my understanding. That was my intent.
Yes, that was part of, those were a couple of provisions in House Bill 2086 dealing with pharmacist liability and physician liability for prescriptions and for the writing of the prescriptions.
Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. We've had that explanation. And I make the motion that we amend Senate Bill 62 with the balloon language that has been handed out and discussed. Second from Representative Thomas. Okay. And I can tell you that I have spoken with Fred Patton, and he chairs judiciary, and this is one of the issues that came into play. I did feel like we could meet at least something that was valuable by doing this balloon language with getting, both drugs into statute, but with not getting into the whole issue of all the liability issues. And so that's why I'm working on it, and I hope that you can support that this is an attempt to find a compromise, and that Fred Patton, as the maker of the bill, was very supportive. Further questions or comments? Representative Sanders.
So one of the concerns that it not be a school nurse being the only one allowed to administer these drugs, as I'm reading it now, it says an emergency situation when a school nurse or nurse's designee. So the concern that I had heard was that not all schools have school nurses. So if that's true, how can those schools with no schools nurses have a nurse designate somebody?
Well, I think, and Nick, as he explained that to me, was the existing law and statutes already allowed that for the first drug in the ways that it was currently being done. So by updating this in the same way, the way that the law allowed it to happen with the first drug is still allowed with the second drug. Is that correct, Nick?
Yeah, yes, you are correct, Mr. Chair. As I understand the representative's question, dealing with school nurses in each individual school. I think, yes, you did hear the issue raised that there's not a school nurse in each individual school, but I guess under this language, a school nurse could designate, if there's a school nurse in a school district of a school district, could designate individuals to administer medications such as these at schools if
Okay,
the
so
school nurse is
then,
not
in
there.
other words, schools that don't have nurses won't be able to designate anybody.
I think every school district, they might not have one in every building, but they're going to have one in every district. But did you want to respond to that, Nick? Did you have anything additional to add?
No, I don't, Mr. Chair.
All right. Representative Estes.
Representative, I think I can answer your question. So having been a classroom teacher, when you don't have enough nurses to cover every building, you have nurses rotate, they appoint people or designate someone to cover when they're not there. So even though a district may not have a nurse in a building at all times, they still have contact with the school nurse and there's still someone designated.
And I just want to read the current law, Nick, and if you'll help me clarify this, it says, any person, this is section B, or section 3, section B. Any person who gratuitously and in good faith renders emergency care or treatment through the administration of epinephrine or any school nurse or nurse's designee shall not be held liable. So it sounds like if they don't have a school nurse, any person who gratuitously and in good faith renders the care would not be held liable. So would that mean that if they didn't have a nurse, it wouldn't matter? It would just be any person that gratuitously administers that drug in an emergency situation?
Well, I think under this case with that subsection B and what would be the balloon section 2, that first part that you were referring to, any person who gratuitously and in good faith renders that emergency care would apply for epinephrine. And then it goes on to say, or any school nurse or nurse's designee who gratuitously and in good faith renders emergency care or treatment through the administration of albuterol. So there's a couple different things there. So epinephrine, any person who's doing that in an emergency situation in good faith, whereas with the albuterol, it would be any school nurse or nurse's designee who's rendering that emergency care.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a problem with this because it seems like we're trying to take the place of parents. And my wife plays school nurse from time to time when the school nurse in our district is gone. And they have these drugs there, but they're provided by the parents to be used for their kids who they know have an issue. And I guess I just feel like people need to step up and take care of their kids instead of leaving it to us.
And I know that was a part of the discussion in the hearing, and it was part of the reason why the bill bogged down. I am trying to find compromise that finds middle ground while having that concern into play. And so, if you're voting no, I understand. I'm trying to even with some emergency situations, make sure we're doing what we can. And as a parent, I think most parents would agree with that, but I'm not wanting this to be a slippery slope either, and that's why even with some of the liability issues and everything else, if those issues need to come into play, they need to be in a judiciary committee, and that would be in line with even some of the things you're talking about. So, Representative Stockstill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think the chair is exactly right on that. And to be quite frank, there may be some school districts or some schools, you know, the cost of epinephrine has just gone out of sight. When my son first needed it, it was like $60 for 2 injectors, and now it can be $800 for 2 injectors. So to have those medications on site to maybe protect children who can't afford those epinephrine pens personally, it's a life-saving thing, and I think it's a great thing to have in our schools and so on. And I would highly support that. This is a much improved amendment here, and I think it addresses what we need to address. Thank you.
Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this might be for Nick, but on the amendment, on the last, had been, I guess it's on what page? The last page there, the large one, it talks about in the middle that the school may not maintain an albuterol kit unless the school is consulted with a pharmacist, and then it uses the phrase consultant pharmacist after that. Are those the same? Are consultant pharmacists different than just pharmacists? And maybe for Nick, or if anyone
It is
else
for
knows.
Nick.
So that's what the language that came from current law with regard to epinephrine. So the current law requires a pharmacist to oversee the school supply of epinephrine and consult with the school district about maintenance of that epinephrine kit, and also requires the consultant pharmacist, that pharmacist who is overseeing that school's supply, to be responsible for developing accountability for those kits. This, with regard to albuterol, that's the same exact language that you're seeing there. So albuterol would be the exact same as epinephrine is under current law.
Okay, I thought for a minute there that it was 2 different types of pharmacists, but you explained it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Did you have a follow-up, Representative Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would note that yes, the EpiPens are incredibly expensive, and there's really no reason for it, but you can get a vial of epinephrine and some syringes for about $10.
Okay. Further questions or comments on the amendment? Representative Wolfmore.
Broader question. So it's confusing if this has been for us. I think we're going down the right path, and I'm so glad.
To ask questions.
Yeah, right. And I'm glad we're doing this. And how is this, once we do, hopefully this passes and becomes law, how do we make sure that this all gets out to all the school districts? Does
Well,
ks.gov do that?
I think they will, but then the nurses, I think, will be very instrumental. And again, I know I had communication with the nurses as long as all you did. And I told them when I was trying to, in this compromise, they wanted to go back to the original bill. And if, we could do that. There's a very good chance if we do that, it would set below the line. I think the bill has a lot better chance with this amended language of going forward.
Oh, I'm supportive. I was just wanting to make sure.
No, I don't think there'll be any problem with communication.
Okay, thank you very much.
But again, even, that's something we all do with, working with our school boards and the state board, helping, when we pass legislation, the School Board Association, they all communicate this stuff out. Representative Collins, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to comment on Representative Wolfmore's comment there. I don't know about anyone else, but the superintendents in my district that I serve all keep a pretty close eye on what we do here in Topeka, especially this being the Education Committee, what we do here in this committee. So I think the word will get out.
Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to again say how much I appreciate the original bill and the original amendment and this amendment. I have a question for Nick and then a comment on one of my districts. Nick, regarding liability, would you say this is similar to Good Samaritan laws that currently exist to protect medical professionals that stop to render aid in emergency situations?
Yeah, so current law in 652872B provides almost that good faith rendering of aid exception to liability in these school situations. And that applies only to epinephrine right now. But under this amendment, it would also apply to albuterol.
Okay, thanks. And then as the original protective parent who didn't, put the fence up pretty high around my kids, I wanted to point out that I live in one of the wealthiest counties in the entire country, and yet my high school, when my kids were there 5 years ago, had 1/3 of children on free and reduced lunch, and that's before the pandemic and our current terrible economic situation. The nurse in Olathe testified that half of their EpiPen emergencies did not have an EpiPen on hand. And I did my regular phone a friend. An inhaler, which is how we administer albuterol, can cost $15 to $80. And $80, having to buy one for home and one for school, can make a real difference. That could be a week's worth of groceries for somebody. And I don't want to put parents in that spot where they have to choose groceries or backup safety. And I know we should count on these kids to be able to carry their inhaler, but I can tell you from years at Girl Scout camp, having to follow the kid around with their EpiPen or their inhaler, I can't tell you how many times I had to make a trip back to camp to go get that thing. They just forget, and they're kids. So thanks again so much for the bill.
All right, we've had a good discussion. I'm going to go ahead and close on my amendment, and then we can get into final discussion on the bill as amended. All those in favor of the amended language signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
No.
Okay, the ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. All right, we're back on the bill as amended. And like I said, just to make sure we're handling things right, I'll make the motion that we pass out House Bill 62 as amended. Second from Representative Stockstill. And before I close, I'll allow any more discussion on where we're at right now. Before I close, Representative Sanders.
Well, while I don't like the amendment, I like the underlying bill, so I'll be voting yay.
Okay. I can assure you, and I've spoken to the vision screening people, that if in any way this amendment becomes problematic, I won't let the underlying bill go down. So, but I believe that based on what we're doing, we can show the good faith why that we're doing what we're doing, and it shouldn't be an issue. And I would count on all of my committee members to hopefully to concur with me on that, so that we can communicate why we're doing what we're doing. But again, I won't let the underlying bill go down. Further discussion. Seeing none, wait a minute. Representative Byers.
Thank you. It'll be pretty quick here.
Okay.
As the nurse's designee a number of times, anytime that I would load my band up in school buses and we'd head across town for a contest, I was the person that carried the epinephrine and carried the albuterol and a whole host of other medications that parents had authorized me or authorized the school nurse and then trained me to do. So I'm very, very, very much in favor of this because it's necessary and it's needed. We forget sometimes that kids in school doesn't necessarily mean the one building. They take off and go to the zoo, they take off and go on science fair trips, all kinds of things, and often it's that teacher or another adult sponsor that becomes that in local parentis. So I will support this bill.
All right, further discussion? Seeing none, I close on my motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Committee, thank you. A lot of new members on this committee. I appreciate that we've had good discussion, and it's been a good 3 months. We will be on the floor next week full time, but I just wanted to take the time to thank all of you for your input and participation in making this a good education committee. If you ever have issues or concerns or anything that you would like to discuss with me, I would enjoy talking to you. With that, we are adjourned. Representative Estes.
Can we thank Deborah for
Yes.
rock star job?
It goes without saying that I would not be able to do my job without her efforts, because she is more than a committee assistant to me, she is my partner, and I brainstorm with her a lot, and she helps me to stay out of trouble a lot of times just with her valuable wisdom. And so I appreciate that too. So Representative Collins.
And thanks goes to the reviser and research as well. They do a great job.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your patience with your chairman when he speaks too much. With that, we are adjourned.